Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lowdown. Today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by a man who needs no introduction when it comes to fan engagement and marketing in football. Having previously worked for FIFA, Crystal Palace and London Sport, ANDREI Angelescu is now the project manager of the Romanian Football Federation. He also does some work for UEFA and he produces the fortnightly newsletter Rendez-Vous, covering all things on the commercial side of football. Andre, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Connor. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. So thanks a lot for the invite.
No problem. Andre, of course, a big part of your day-to-day job is fan engagement. Now, could you explain that to the listener, what fan engagement exactly is, and just some of the day-to-day responsibilities and roles involved?
I think I started to have an interest in fan engagement during my studies at university when I tried to find the definition for fan engagement, and it proved to be a bit difficult to identify a specific one because after I've done some extensive research, I've realized that there is no common understanding for what fan engagement actually means. However, after looking at some academic papers and industry reports, I think one of the best theoretizations of it was made by an academic called Yoshida, a Japanese researcher who identified fan engagement as at the intersection of non-transactional behaviors and external behaviors. So I think if we want to define it, it can be a challenge, but I think a lot of people are doing a lot of great work when it comes to developing a good engagement with their audiences, with their fans. And in my day-to-day work, I'm trying to make use of this attitude, and I'm trying to be as fan-centric as possible, and trying to make the organizations that I work with realize the importance of having a relationship with their fans and really getting to understand them as much as possible.
Fantastic. And in this digital age, Andre, there's so many competing influences for people's time with infinite amounts of content available. How has commercialization changed what it means to be a football fan nowadays?
I think a big part of it is related to the data because commercial partners have an understandable interest around this topic, around data. And that's really easy to understand because we see how the world has changed in the last few decades, and we see a lot of technology companies that rely on a lot on data. If we want to give some examples, we could look at Facebook. Maybe we could look at I don't know, Netflix, if we want to tackle the video streaming business. So football clubs and sport organizations in general can as well be data companies. And they should be developing this attitude, which makes them to put a great emphasis on data and capture as much data as possible from their fans, from their stakeholders. Of course, by doing it in a meaningful way. So they capture the data so that they can give value back to their stakeholders. And also they comply with all the regulations that have been much more strict in the last few years, especially after the introduction of the GDPR regulations in the European Union.
And do you think there's a danger there, Andre, of exploiting fans? And we've heard in in many circles, perhaps in English football as well, that a lot of fans believe their love and passion for their local clubs in many instances is being taken advantage of. What do you think about that?
Do you mean the risk of not treating the data accordingly? And
Correct.
not complying. Yeah, I think it's a subject that has been treated with a lot of fear by a lot of the sport organizations because, of course, the laws are a lot more strict than before, but that shouldn't be something that um, the new regulations shouldn't be something that stop the clubs, the sport organizations from doing the best they can with the available data. And I say that because it's really, really crucial to understand that these regulations were introduced in order to make some sort of justice for the customer and to avoid the spamming and the I'm gonna say maybe the use of data that isn't exactly that wasn't exactly purposeful before. And if I am to give an example of a way in which data has done damage before, is something that is probably quite well known across the marketing industry. I know that a woman in the UK was donating for a charity because she was passionate about the work that they were doing. But then that charity shared her details with another charity who passed them over to another one. And this way she ended up on the marketing list of tens of charities that kept messaging her and encouraging her to donate. And because she was a good person, she kept donating. And at the end of the day, she ended up being spammed with all these communications from a lot of charities. And in the end, she felt like she couldn't give back as much as she wanted because obviously she kept donating for loads and loads of charities, but the list kept growing. And because she couldn't achieve her vision anymore, let's say it like this, she had to self-harm herself, which is an extreme example of how the bad use of data can negatively affect a person. And that's why these stricter regulations have been introduced in our industry as well, and all of Europe in all the industries.
Of course, that's quite welcome change, Andre. Some unwelcome change in the industry perhaps has been COVID. Now, we've seen a lot of organizations, particularly in the sports industry, innovate and adapt to the changing times. But what are some of the growing trends we have seen in early stages of 2021 so far when it comes to fan engagement and also sponsorship?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that we've been facing as well within the Romanian Football Federation is obviously the sport properties not being able to deliver the original commitments they had to the sponsors and to the commercial partners. So I think the sport organizations had to prove themselves that they are creative, and they had to find innovative ways to deliver a new value proposition to these commercial partners and to the sponsors. And to give an example, I think a really powerful pillar on which sport organizations can rely is probably the video streaming. We see more and more clubs trying to develop their own over-the-top services maybe, or just finding video streaming partners through which they can improve the experience of their fans, and also offering new places to expose their commercial partners. And also, I think it's important to mention about the value that engagement apps can have. A lot of the clubs and sport organizations are developing their own mobile applications that the fans can download, and even during the games, even if they're not in the stadium, they can feel closer to the team with the extra insights they can get through these new applications and through the exclusive content that can be delivered through these means.
Brilliant. And I know a big part of your work, Andre, also is the research of TV rights, broadcasting rights, so to speak. Now, we've seen the Premier League rights after hitting a peak in 2018. We've seen a decrease now. What does that mean for the economic model of English clubs going forward?
I think, especially if we look at the investment that Amazon has made into football, they seem to be willing to pay more and more and to allocate more funds towards the buying of media rights in sports. The traditional broadcasters are facing an age where these companies that have over-the-top models can intervene and take a significant percentage of the market cap. And I think this is something that will be seen also in the Premier League, where I think the next due date for the negotiation of the contracts is this year, if not in 2020. And we are most likely to see a slight increase from these over-the-top platforms like Amazon. And I think it's also likely that maybe we can see the broadcasters being more willing to be more innovative when it comes to the way they show sport. And I think it wouldn't be a surprise if we see companies like BT Sport or Sky trying to come up with just innovative solutions to improve the viewing experience of the viewers. And I remember a great example. It's what BT, I think, did in 2018 with the FIFA World Cup, when they had the 360 cameras that the fans could use through the, I think it was BBC or BT app, and they could see a 360 perspective of the game from various spots in the stadium, which was, I think, the first of its kind, and a great initiative when it comes to fan engagement, because at the end of the day, fan engagement comes to being the growth strategy of long-term relationships between sport institutions and the fan groups. And the clubs and sport organizations have got to be innovative to sustain this growth of the relationship between them and the stakeholders, in this instance, the fan groups.
Of course. And Andre, do you foresee a day, possibly within the next 5 to 10 years even, where the likes of these streaming platforms like Amazon, Netflix, DAZN, as we've seen in Germany and Austria, usurp the likes of Sky Sports and BT, especially in the UK?
I think it might be early to give a clear verdict, but there is a chance, obviously, because these technology companies have really high revenue streams that they can rely on, and anything is possible. And I think other than these really rich revenues that they can use in order to overtake the traditional broadcasters, there are also companies that nurture innovation and research and development, and I think that can make a big difference, because if we look at Amazon, Netflix, they are in the business, no matter of which business we speak about, for an infinite game. And I think sometimes these traditional broadcasts can have a short-term vision rather than a long-term one, and they might be focusing on the present moment and on winning some bids for specific competitions that have traditionally been quite popular and have been delivering good ROIs. But then these technology companies with long-term vision and with the vision of being in an infinite game, they can just test different new technologies on smaller competitions maybe, and then scale them when they think the market is ready for that by making significant bids over the traditional broadcasts.
And then what's the benefit of having these games or some of these games for free on streaming platforms? To the best of my knowledge, you have the DFB Pokal in Germany, the Coppa Italia in Italy, both live for free on YouTube, as you do with the Segunda in Spain, or you did, albeit for a brief limited time. And the Brazil Campeonato is live for free now on Facebook. What benefits are there to hosting games for free on these streaming platforms?
I think it depends to the strategies of the companies that we're speaking about. For example, within the Romanian Football Federation, we have been trying to, let's say, avoid recently to grow a lot our social networks, because at the end of the day, there is a metaphor that we use that our accounts on Facebook, YouTube maybe, is just a land that we borrow from someone, which is the owners of these big companies. And I think the vision is, at the end of the day, try to build your own databases, which you're an owner of and a processor of. And no matter what happens, no matter how technology evolves, you'd be able to just signpost the people that you have the rights to contact to the new platforms that will emerge. I think a lot of the companies that just do the live streaming, the free line streamings on YouTube, on Facebook, are just trying to build awareness at the moment to the fact that their games can be watched for free. And then also it's probably interesting in terms of testing for specific markets, because platforms such as Facebook would have quite good amount of analytics that would give you access to, and you'd be able to see what kind of people are interested in your product. You'd be able to see to which international markets your league could appeal, or your competition could appeal. So I think it all comes down to the strategy of your business and the move that you decide to make.
I suppose one particular thing that I'm interested about is, of course, you look at the Premier League, Andre, how huge it is globally. I've been fortunate enough to have lived in places like New York, San Francisco, now Dubai, and I can attest to the image of it worldwide. I've done the Premier League breakfast mornings in New York and San Francisco, and over here in Dubai, I can attest to it. It's most certainly being in a bar packed out watching bloody Southampton Newcastle of all things. But you have leagues just below the Premier League, in inverted commas, La Liga and Syria. What steps are they taking to grow internationally now and expand their market base?
I think it's really a really interesting topic, and here we have a really good example that we could look at, and that is definitely La Liga. They have been they definitely have a very solid and clear internalization strategy, and you can see that in their actions and in even in the support they give to the clubs. If we look at Eibar, they have been receiving some support to grow in the Eastern markets. Also, if you see an Asian player in one of the clubs, they would be encouraged to exploit that market and to try to grow internationally using this asset they would have, the international player from an Eastern country. And other than this support they give to the clubs, they also have specific actions they are trying to pursue in order to become more international and diversify their international audience. For example, they are opening some sort of a museum exhibition that's going to be toured around the world. And they also have some companies, media companies, that they work with in emerging regions that are identifies to be of great potential for them. So they definitely try to create a unique value proposition for these emerging markets that they can exploit with their product that would be appealing for the general product, which is the competition, La Liga.
And you see the effort, energy, and resources spent on growing their respective leagues internationally. Then why do we see more of an added shift, especially in the past few years, Andre, towards a European Super League or a restructuring of the Champions League, even, so to speak? I mean, how fearful are you that will only serve to alienate an ever desensitized fan base in football? Because we all know football without fans is nothing. I mean, as a Chelsea supporter, even I have to admit I'm a bit more desensitized or less of a fan, so to speak, since that ability to attend games at Stamford Bridge was taken away for me. And it's the same for a lot of people. It's no coincidence in my eyes, Liverpool's home form at the moment, 6 home defeats in a row. Huge factor being the no fans at Anfield. I mean, what's your verdict?
Yeah, I think it's a really sensitive topic, and I'm also a great example of it as a fan, because I don't know if you're familiar, but in Romania we had the most successful team in the country, Steaua Bucharest. They won the UEFA Champions League, which was called the Champions Cup back in 1986. And around 2006, let's say, the club was bought by a businessman, a Romanian businessman called Gigi Becali, and he decided so basically that's when the club went private, because before that it was owned by the Ministry of Defense in Romania. And after that, he was in charge of the club for 10 years or so. And then the Ministry of Defense started to contest the way he bought the club. And because of that, they started a new club and went to court in order to be allowed to use the name Steaua for their own club, so for the ministry's club. And this way, now we have a team which is called Steaua in the 3rd division. And the previous team that this businessman bought and made private is now called FCSB, which comes from Football Club Steaua Bucharest, obviously. And they're in the 1st league of Romania. But the thing is, none of these clubs is the real Steaua anymore, or at least in my opinion. The matter of the history of the club is still disputed. Basically, the Army's club is having the heritage and the history up to 2006, and then they took a break and they started again from the lower leagues in 2010 or so. And then this FCSB club is functioning at least on paper since 2006. So none of the clubs, I think, because of this dispute and incident, which took years in court, the clubs lost their identity. And if we speak about engaging fans, it's really important to understand that football is a socially and culturally embedded sport. And because of that, the fans that consume it have different motivations. And at the end of the day, it's really important for the sport clubs to understand those motivations and to take account of them when they take any action, basically, and when they speak about the strategy. But because I think it's important to have this fan-centric philosophy when you speak about a strategy, no matter if you're a governing body or a private football club.
I suppose that's the beauty of football, though. A lot of people have different motivations, but it's the game itself. It's so powerful.
Yeah,
It's a social
definitely.
social construct to kind of unify everyone. I know you personally yourself, Andre, and I know how big you are on your belief in how much I suppose football can be, it can make the world a better place. I suppose from your experience to date, have you any heartwarming stories, I mean, you wish to share about possible projects you've worked on in the past?
Yeah, definitely. A really successful, I'd say, event that I previously worked on is a charity football match followed by a gala, which took place in Romania. And it was an event organized in order to fundraise for a former Romanian football player called Mihai Neşu. He was a player in the national team of Romania, a player of Steaua Bucharest, and he was a player in the Netherlands for FC Utrecht when he got seriously injured in one of the training sessions at the club. He was transported in the hospital immediately. He was really close to lose his life, unfortunately. And after this incident, he got paralyzed, and he's currently disabled, not being able to move from the bottom of his neck below. So this person went through a lot of medical operations, interventions after this injury. A lot of people feared for his life for a really long period of time. And once he got stable, he decided to find a new purpose in life after his career as a professional footballer. And he thought that the best way that he could give back to the community and to the people in his hometown in the west of Romania was to create a foundation which would help disabled young people, and he basically supports them with the medical procedures and with the treatment they need in order to get better. And all the money he earned from football prior to his injury and all his financial resources went into this foundation. And he basically started to neglect himself, let's say, because he's a really good person from the deep of his soul. I think he is a genuinely good person, and he puts others before himself. And basically because of these facts, one of his former teammates, Romanian, also a Romanian footballer who played for Steaua Bucharest and later on for Ajax as well, called Giorgio Gararu, he decided to organize these events. His plan was to run them every 2 years. And the event was called Uniți pentru Mihai, United for Mihai, which was the name of Mihai Neșu. And I volunteered for this second event. And I think the most impressive thing that I could see when I went to Oradea for this football match and for the gala was the fact that this person, Mihai Neșu, even if he could just move his head basically, and he was in a wheelchair, which was controlled with his mouth, on the day before the event and on the day of the event, which was a friendly football match, he was at the stadium trying to make sure that everything runs smoothly. Then all the branding that you could see at the stadium, the access boards for the media, for the guests, and all the signage that you could see in the perimeter, it was designed by himself. Even if he can't move his hands, he can't move his legs, he just uses his mouth. And he's such a determined person who is making a difference for a lot of souls every day. And even when an event was organized in order to help himself, because he forgets about himself and just puts the other ahead of himself, he still was fully involved and just gave everything, just as he did when he was on the pitch, because he was a footballer that was always really determined. You saw him doing a lot of sliding tackles without getting a lot of yellow or red cards. So I think he has something deep inside him which makes him a really special person, and I am really grateful for having had the opportunity to work on an event organized in his honor.
That's an absolutely incredible story. I'll be sure to link Mihai's foundation down below in the show notes. And how long has Mihai been running this foundation for?
I think he's been doing it for around 5 years, maybe something like that. And at the moment, they have an amazing project. They are trying to build a bigger center in the outskirts of this Romanian city called Oradea. And the project is again incredible, and it started with Mihai's vision to make this foundation bigger and accessible to more people, and he actually designed the whole plan for the foundation.
It's incredible, really, that nowadays we're almost like football junkies. We're just waiting for a next fix. When's the next game on? You have highlights on social media. You have every single game on every single channel. But you hear stories now and again, just like what you elaborated upon there with Mihai, and it does knock you for six. It's absolutely inspirational stuff. Um, I mean, it's quite unfortunate. I haven't been made aware of this story before. And I'm pretty certain there's plenty of other people out there who haven't either. So I'll definitely link that below in the show notes. I mean, getting back to the current day now, Andrei, in the past, you've worked at huge tournaments, most recently being 2019 Women's World Cup. This summer, I know you're part of the UEFA team who's hoping to stage this summer's Euros. I mean, being in amongst the midst of things now, what are the big challenges for you guys at this moment in staging this event?
I think it's really hard to deal with the unpredictable, because with the really changing times that we're living, and with the really unpredictable number of COVID cases that the host countries are having to deal with, it's really difficult to plan things. And the best you can do is just working on several scenarios, which is what UEFA is currently doing with the UEFA Euro 2020. Of course, the organizing team is planning on both the full stadium, the possibility of the games to be played in front of full crowds, and also the possibility to, at the other end, the possibility to play in front of empty stands, which would be really sad, unfortunately. But I think it would still be a celebration of football, which would be appreciated by the fans, even if it would be from in front of their TVs at home.
Brilliant. And then could you tell us a bit more about your work with the Romanian Football Federation? I know you work in a project managerial capacity for them also.
Yeah, so as I was saying, the sport organizations are starting to pay more attention to data, and especially with the pandemic, they have been starting to be more digitally driven. And my work within the Romanian Football Federation is at the cross of these two areas of being data driven and also trying to be more aware of the digital possibilities and opportunities that might come up with a digital transformation. We are working on a couple of digital products that we will launch in the upcoming months, and hopefully they would become something that would be good examples to share across the industry in the coming months. So I think watch this space, and hopefully you'll find inspiration in our work in
Fantastic.
a couple of months or so.
Fantastic. And then I know in your spare time, Andrei, you're quite passionate about the fortnightly newsletter which you produce called the Rendez-Vous. Could you tell everyone a bit about that? I've read the last 2 issues actually as well. Quite quite fascinating, really.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. Rendezvous is something that I'm really passionate about, and it's exactly putting into a weekly newsletter or a fortnightly newsletter my passion for all things commercial, marketing, digital, while also looking at hot topics in the industry, such as women's football or esports. And I'm a person that believes in continuous education, and I think that this newsletter is one of the things that allows me to give back to all the people interested in the same stuff as me in this area of sport.
And then going forward, Andrew, I mean, you've worked for huge organizations like FIFA, UEFA, you've worked for clubs such as Crystal Palace. I know now you're doing your own bit of creative work with Rendezvous. Where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
I think, again, it's really unpredictable, especially with the current events that we've seen. But I really love the buzz around these major events, such as the FIFA World Cup or the UEFA Euro. No matter if we speak about the men's or the women's versions. So I would really like to keep playing an active role in the organizing teams of these major competitions, because that's something that, as a fan of football, makes me really happy to know that I'd be able to be a part of this major buzz around the events. And then I know that in the world there are a lot of people that feel the same like myself, and I would be really happy and I would feel really accomplished to know that I'm able to deliver that amount of joy and happiness to a lot of people. And then also I'm really passionate about sustainability and making football a more sustainable business. So maybe in the upcoming years, I will try to focus all my knowledge and efforts around this topic, which is quite hot in the industry. And maybe I will be able to associate myself with a number of people that would share my vision and values in this aspect, sustainability in football. And hopefully we can start a venture or something to tackle this matter.
That's awesome. Certainly exciting times ahead for both yourself, Andrei, and Romanian football. Now, should anyone wish to reach out to you on social media, Andrei, where's best to connect?
I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so you can find me over there. And then also you can check my website if you want to read about my professional background, which I fully shared on sportmktg.net. And you can also find my email address over there. So if you want to get in touch, please don't hesitate to do so.
Fantastic. I'll be sure to link all below in the show notes. Andre, top man, absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks a lot, Connor. Cheers.